Welcome. I'm Rielly Karsh.
I'm Tovah Copan.
We are thrilled to bring you the We Go Boldly podcast.
Let's talk big burning questions, life changes, and maybe a bit of personal business.
Let's be bold and brave together. Are you ready?
I am. Here comes the show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to We Go Boldly, the podcast. It is season 10. It is a new year. I don't know what the right words are. I always say very excited and thrilled to have you guys with us. And all of that is true. But I am also very grateful. Like, I feel a lot of gratitude for our regular listeners and our new listeners, and for you, Tovah. I want to make sure, and this goes to our topic for today, I want to make sure that I am expressing that gratitude. I tend to hold things in. So I want to make sure I'm putting it out there so you all hear us when we say, and I'm speaking for Tovah, but I know she feels this way, that we are so thankful to be able to do this, to have our podcast exist at all, and for people to listen to it, because it was, I don't want to say it was a pipe dream, because that's very, what's the word I want? It like downplays the significance of it all, but it was a dream. And we didn't know if it would come to fruition, and it is. And now we're in season 10, and I feel like that's pretty amazing. So thank you all for listening, and Tovah for being my partner on the show. I know this is like I'm closing out the show and I'm actually starting it, but let me say hello to my fantastical co-host Tovah and see how she's doing today before we dive into our season 10 topic. So Tovah, what's happening? What's shaking?
I'm shaking well. I'm well shaken.
You're well shaken.
It's the second episode of the new year, but our first one that we're recording in the new year.
Yeah.
So it feels new. Although, as you can see, if you look behind me, my house is still very holiday-y. Next week will be different. The ones we record going forward, we will be de-holiday-ing and moving into our hibernating part of the year, which I very much enjoy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have been, interestingly enough, very timely for our topic, struggling with sleeping recently and getting enough of it. And as I was reading over the outline that you put together, it's interesting because it is going to be a tag team of all of the different ways that we think of self-care in order to address like my sleeping issues and to help me. Like, it's going to be like traditional, like what pop culture thinks of self-care. It's going to be like bubble baths, and like then it's going to be like the next level of Instagram, but like deeper, like naps. And then it's going to be, like working with healthcare professionals, but then like talking to friends. And it's, it's going to be like, where's the anxiety coming from? It's interesting because I could be a case study in how to master the art of self-care.
Well, you know what? Yes to all of that, but also I think we all can. Like, we all have
100%.
times in our lives for our self-care. And in case you haven't noticed, our topic for today is how to self-care. But to my point, we all have times where we struggle with self-care, where we forget what it even means, where we don't feel like we have time for it, where other people sort of like get in the way of it, whether intentionally or not. And so there is never a point in our lives where self-care is no longer relevant. It's always relevant. And I want to talk, the outline I did for this episode is extensive, and it's extensive for a reason. This is a huge topic, and there are so many nuances and layers to it that I didn't really want to miss anything, but I'm not sure we're going to get it all in. We'll do our best. So what I obviously want to start with is definitions, and like, what are we even talking about when we say self-care, or what are you thinking when we say self-care, that kind of thing. So just to lay the groundwork like we like to do, when I'm talking about self-care, I'm talking about, your mental health and your physical health and your spiritual health, right? Like, all of those things combined, but I'm talking about how it is that we as individuals and as care providers for some of us, how we relate to the world in a way that is healthy for us. And when I
Mm,
say relate to, I mean like physically, what are we doing? Mentally, what's going on in our inside our brains, right? What's that inner monologue doing? Spiritually, are we connected in any way to anything, right? Like it doesn't matter what it is, but are we connected in some way? um and so all of those things come into play to make up self-care. Now, I think since the 80s, 90s, self-care has been hijacked and turned into a commodity that people can sell you, right? Like, and I don't even know that that's a bad thing. Like, I'm a capitalist. I think, great, you want to make money. But what happened is people lost track of what self-care really means, right?
yeah.
It doesn't mean you have to spend $1,000 at a spa day, right? It doesn't mean you have to get your nails done every week. It doesn't mean that you're luxuriating in something all day long in order to self-care. That's not, frankly, that's not always self-care. Sometimes that's self-harm if you don't enjoy it and you're doing it because other people tell you you're supposed to. So self-care is one of those things that we a lot of times define by what it isn't. Like many things, right? Like we just, it's sort of an order of like decreasing value. What is it not? And then we get to an idea of what it is. Um, but I want to tell you a couple things, and then Tova, I'm going to have you jump in. But there are a couple of things that I think are misconceptions and myths around self-care that I want to clear up. And then we can sort of go back to defining how self-care is more of a discipline and less of a like luxury buy at the checkout counter. So first of all, let's just take this one out of the running. Self-care is not synonymous with self-indulgence or being selfish. Like it's just not. It's not about indulging yourself. It's not about being selfish with your time or your energy or your money or your, I don't know, your anything. It's just, that's not what we're talking about here. And then first, I think the first and biggest topic that I found in researching is that self-care is almost exclusively aimed at women, and particularly white wealthy women, right? Like as a concept in on Instagram, on
Right.
Facebook, in our emails, and I think that that is wildly miscalculating, right? Like that is not what we're talking about here. We're not talking about privileged self-care. So there's that. And then it's characterized as this indulgence. And it's, it's not indulgent to take care of your body. It wouldn't be indulgent to take your diabetes medication. It wouldn't be indulgent to get cancer treatment. And this is, I think,
And
on the
it shouldn't
same,
be financially prohibitive.
well, right. There's that whole topic as well. But I think, sometimes we forget that self-care is preventative medicine,
Yeah.
and it's a way to, or and actually it's preventative medicine, but it's also like reactive medicine to certain circumstances, which goes to what you've been talking about, Tova. So all of that comes back to the idea that self-care is generally speaking a discipline, and it takes like practice and effort and thought. And one thing I read that I laughed out loud at, and then I was like, oh yeah, I guess that's true, is that self-care is kind of boring because it's repetitive and it's stuff that we maybe don't always want to do, but we know we need to do for our own health. Like finding a therapist. Like I don't always want to
Yeah.
like make 16 phone calls to figure out who I could see and talk to them and then rehash things, like it stinks. That stinks, but it's still self-care and it's still beneficial in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And, as you've been talking, and also just as I've been thinking about self-care over the last few days, I've been thinking about, first of all, when I open myself up to find signs, the universe sends signs, right? So like I get Instagram posts suddenly about self-care, or I read about self-care in books, or I just have memories that come back. And none of them are ever talking about spending money. None of them are talking about being indulgent. And I do want to emphasize, like, if you get your nails done weekly because it is a routine for you that you cherish,
Yeah.
Perhaps it's something that you do with friends. Perhaps it's something that you do by yourself because it is the hour of private time that you really value and that you find great joy looking at your hands and knowing they're well cared for. And like that is 100%, but it's the routine of it, right? Like there's,
Yeah.
you
It's
know,
the
so
ritual involved in the whole
it,
process.
yeah. And that it is less to do about the actual getting your nails done and more to do with everything else. So we don't want to diminish like a traditional self-care
I
experience.
I'm just going to jump in for a second. I think the question to ask yourself when you're looking at self-care is, am I doing this for me or am I
Right.
doing this so that somebody else will feel a certain way about me?
There you go. I like it. Um, but like, for example, I saw a reel yesterday or even this morning, maybe, actually of a mom. I want to say it's the Diary of an Honest Mom. She's a
Mm,
woman who presented at Mom 2.0 last year. And and it was talking about kind of some rules that she set in her life. And for example, one of the rules is the hour of dinner time. She has a rule with her husband that there can be no important conversations. Like, this is not when they talk about where they're going on vacation. This is not when they talk
mm,
about bills. This is like during that hour, they do not talk about important things because it is a stressful time. It is getting the kids to eat. It is getting dinner made. It is a stressful time. And so she has said no to those conversations.
yeah.
Um, I remember learning once that someone had set a rule that like their kid, they don't talk when they're transitioning from the house to the car or the car to the house. And while I don't haven't been stringent on that rule, my kids know and don't get offended anymore if like they ask a question and I'm like, when we're all buckled, I'll answer it. Like they know like I'm not going to be grabbing bags and grabbing kids and answering real questions as
Right.
I'm trying to hustle out the door. That's not something I'm going to be doing. We're already doing something. And when we get in the car, then I will answer the question. And you might have to ask it again because I might not even listen to it. And to me, that's self-care. That's
Right.
like, and it is setting a boundary, but it is giving myself time and space. And sometimes the time and space looks like getting my nails done. Sometimes it's reading, sometimes it's a bubble bath, but sometimes it's saying, I'm not going to have this conversation. Um, and sometimes it's, I found out last week that a coworker passed away suddenly. And it really hit me very hard. I did not know why. I still don't know why, but there were a lot of feelings because I immediately created a whole story as to why she passed away, because that's what you do when you don't know why.
Right.
And so suddenly it felt very confusing as to why she did and why I didn't. And, there was this whole very confusingness. And in the past, I would have not allowed myself to cry in front of my kids. I would have pretended everything was okay. And then I would have gotten angry and annoyed that they didn't understand that they needed to give me space. And so instead, I, let myself be sad in front of them. They asked why I was sad. I told them. And then my oldest, who was clearly uncomfortable with me being sad, I said to him, I'm going to try something new this time. And I'm going to let myself just be sad rather than pretend I'm not sad and get angry. And that's something that he and I have talked a lot about with him. And so he kind of laughed and was like, okay, like give that a go, see if that works. And
See what
and
happens.
yeah, see what works there. And so, you know, that was giving me time and space.
Yeah.
And so for me, the how to of self-care is figuring out how to build that foundation of where do I need time and space and how do I build it for my physical, mental, and emotional health.
Yeah. And I think, it's really important to start to understand when we're talking about self-care that everyone's self-care looks different, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's self-care looks, feels, sounds, and might be completely opposite of somebody else's. It's unique to you. And I think much like asking yourself, am I doing this for me or am I doing this for somebody outside of myself? You can ask yourself, is what I'm doing or thinking or feeling or creating or whatever, does this bring me sustained joy in the long run? right? Like if going, and I want to get away from the nail salon because I think that's so cliched, but like if going to the nail salon every week brings you joy throughout the year, super. That's fantastic. If it feels like a chore and a hassle, then it's not bringing you joy, right? I mean,
Well, yeah.
consistently, right? Not like maybe once in a while
I
it
can
does.
use a different example. That's the gym, right?
Yeah.
Physical healthcare. Um, because I just heard an interview with Arnold Schwarzenegger. So Arnold Schwarzenegger apparently rides his bike 45 minutes a day and works out 45 minutes a day. Not heavy lifting like he once did, although I'm
Mm,
sure his light lifting is like very heavy.
I would
But
imagine.
yeah, but not heavy lifting because he used to be good to his valves that he got replaced. And
Right.
so, but like they were interviewing him, he's like, yeah, I go to Gold's Gym. And they were like, you must be able to afford your own gym.
Right.
And he's like, yeah, but I forget what he called himself. It was a queen something or something queen. He's like, I like people. I don't like doing things by myself. I don't want to have lunch by myself. I don't want to be at the gym by myself. I don't want to work out by myself. I can. Like, I have a gym at home.
Right.
I just don't want to work out by myself. Like, I would much rather ride my bike and go to the gym and work out with other people, even if, and they were talking like, do you like work in? Like they were totally fascinated by like, what if somebody's like on your bench and they're like
Right.
playing on their phone and he's like, I just ask if it's okay if I work in. but but he's like, I get more out of working out if I'm doing it with somebody else.
Yeah.
And he talked about how working out for him is such so there's two levels of mental health for him there, right? Like there's so many levels of self-care happening there, but there's the
Yeah.
physical, like it is such a routine for him. It is
Right.
such an important part of his physical routine and trying to stay fit. And you get older and it's harder to stay in good shape. And he said, it's so important. I don't feel good if I haven't gone to the gym.
Right.
But then there's also the social level. And he wants to be at a gym with other people. He
Yeah.
does not want to be at his fancy private gym that he has in his house. And so he rides his bike to Gold's Gym every day. And so many people would be like, if I had a private gym, I would go to the private gym. And then other people would not go to a private gym because they need the accountability of somebody. I mean, like
Right.
there's a variety of things, but to your point of um it looking different for everybody, the idea of going to a crowded gym for so many people would be the opposite of self-care.
Mm-hmm.
And yet for him, he gets like a double charge, right? He
Yeah.
gets the charge from going to the gym. And I imagine they're what many would be considered like draining interactions because I'm sure people that are like, oh, I'll be back. And,
Yeah. Oh,
like they
yeah. I'm
yell
sure
things.
there's fans and people coming up
Yeah.
to him and
I
whatever.
mean, I'm sure it's
Right.
like a fancy exclusive like gold gym, but still.
Yeah, but still.
Um, and so like he gets like the double charge of both the social exposure and then um the exposure, like the gym boost of
Yeah.
self-care.
Yeah.
And so I think it is really important to figure out what is good for you because I think it is so easy to see people experience something, especially on social media, where I don't want to say that we get a look at people's inner lives because we get the look of people's inner lives that they want us to see.
Yeah.
But we get a look at people's lives, and it's so easy to be like, oh my gosh, they're doing that. Why aren't I doing that? And there's so many times that I have to think, but would you actually enjoy that?
Right. Like, do I
Like,
really want to do that?
a- and the answer is so often of something that moments previous I was like feeling envious over. I'm like, no, no, I would not want to do that.
Absolutely. All right, so we need to take a quick break and we're going to do that. When we come back, let's talk about your one of your favorite topics, Tova. Let's talk about setting realistic goals. And then we will dive into kind of how you craft your own self-care routine, right? But let's talk about goal setting real quick and then we'll get into how you figure out your own routine. We will be right back after. Hey, Tova, you know what I love?
Coffee, definitions, uninterrupted reading time.
Okay, all of those things are true. but I also love maps.
As in Siri, take me to the beach.
Yeah. Also, as in, who am I really and who do I want to be?
Yeah, I figured that's what you meant, but I also have the beach on my mind. So,
Well, we were talking about things we love, so that definitely makes sense. But the map I was thinking about is our Defining You course.
yes, we put together defining you as a way to map where you are and how you want to live your life.
So true. So many people struggle to find their purpose in a busy and noisy world.
That's why we made Defining You, our course meant to guide you to creating your own mission statement.
And there's good news. You can get it now on teachable.com. Find the link on our website at goboldlyinitiative.com/courses, or check out the link on our Instagram bio at Go Boldly Together.
We can't wait to see you there. Now, let's head back to the show.
All right. Welcome back to the show. As I said before the break, let's talk a little bit about goal setting and what that even looks like, and particularly what it looks like in terms of self care. So, one thing that I was reading, which I found super helpful, obvious, but super helpful, because I hadn't really thought about it. So, maybe it's not that obvious, is that, there's short term self care and there's long term self care, and both are important and valid and necessary, right? Um, so when we're setting our goals, Tova and I like to use like a mixture of SMART goals and fun goals and goals that are interesting to you and all of that stuff. And if you're interested in it, actually, you join our year review crew, because we do a lot of goal setting in that group. Just a quick plug for the year review crew. We love that group. But back to my point. So there's short-term self-care and there's long-term self-care. Short-term self-care, as it sounds, makes us feel good instantly. And a lot of that is, the luxurious, I'm doing air quotes in my mind, the luxurious self-care that we see online. And it could be anything from, eating out for a meal to buying yourself a gift to doing a beauty routine. Couple thoughts that I liked that I saw: skipping a workout can be self-care. Like if you are just tired and need a break, skipping a workout can actually bring you self-care feelings. Taking naps can be self-care. And saying no can also be self-care. And it can bring you that sort of instant relief that you're looking for. I think short-term self-care is something that comes in when we are struggling and in a crisis and not in our best mental space. So a lot of times that's when short-term self-care comes in. Long-term self-care, however, is about investing our energy in improving our well-being for the long run, right? So that's just what it sounds like. You do things repeatedly with discipline over time. And I know that you hate that word, Tova, but I'm using it anyway. You do things over and over and over again to build up your self-care reserves. That's how I look at it anyway. Like, we're going to go back to our buckets that we love. You fill up your bucket of self-care and eventually it's full and you feel, relief, right? But it takes time sometimes.
I want to hop in and
Yeah.
explain in case somebody's new and doesn't know why I don't like the word discipline.
Yes. Yeah, please.
Especially this time of year. So, as you are enjoying the new year and you are looking at people setting goals and they are going to the gym every day, or maybe there are people who have been going to the gym every day for years and years and you're trying to emulate them. You're excited to get out there and go to the gym. Right. Whatever the case might be. You are going to look at people and you're going to say, man, they are really motivated. Or you're going to say they're really disciplined, as if discipline is this something that somebody has or does not have. As if there is something like innately in someone that exists that allows them to be disciplined or not disciplined. When more often than not, someone has figured out what can motivate them, and not that they are intrinsically motivated, not that they just wake up each day and they're like, I love to work out. I mean, Arnold perhaps, but I feel like in many cases he is an outlier. So let's, not use Arnold as an example. Um, and the Republican who was governor many times in California. Um, so, I think people who are motivated, they are not intrinsically motivated traditionally. They have found things that motivate them, right?
Right.
They have found things that have provided inspiration for them to get them out of bed, to do the hard things.
Right.
And those things could be they have taken the time to do a deep dive into their inner workings to figure out what kind of accountability they need. Um, Maybe they bristle with accountability, right? Like maybe they hate accountability. And so every time they've tried to be accountable to somebody, it has blown up. Maybe they like money. And maybe they have figured out that they will pay themselves to go to the gym. Or, there used to be those programs, I don't know if they still exist, where like gyms would pay you or your health insurance would pay you to
Mm,
like go to the gym. Maybe
right.
that works for somebody. But the fact is that when somebody is motivated, it means that there is something motivating them. It doesn't mean that they are intrinsically motivated. And generally, when somebody appears to be disciplined, it means that they've taken whatever activity that they're doing with such incredible discipline and they have turned it into a routine or a habit. So they have made it so, for the most part, it has become a non-negotiable in their life.
Right.
And instead of being a person who reads a lot, they are just a reader.
Right.
It is, and that is what you want to achieve when you are trying to achieve that level of what appears to be discipline.
Yeah.
Is you don't want to be a person who works out a lot. You are just a gym goer. You're just an active person. And so if you read James Clear Atomic Habits, or if you read a lot of other books, what they'll tell you is in order to achieve that level of what appears to be discipline, you need to figure out what a person who does that behavior is. What are they like? And then you kind of take on that personality traits and you figure out what you need to motivate yourself. And it's not like, listen, I have little inspirational quotes all over my house. I'm a big fan of those, but those will not get me out the door in the morning if I already don't have something else that, motivates me to get out the door in the morning. They'll just help me, maybe do it with more of a positive attitude. Um, so like you need to figure out what is going to motivate you and then at some point, after doing it over and over again, it can become part of your habit and part of your routine. And there's lots of ways to make habits, and and that's not what today is about. But the point is, discipline in the way that we use it in society essentially is a farce is not the best word, but it is made up and it is often used, especially this time of year, to make people feel bad. So
Right.
you don't lack discipline. Um, so just let go of that. If that is like, I want you to take so much more from this episode, but like literally, if that's all you take, I would be really happy.
Yeah.
Um, but
Well,
just
so
yeah, let's focus on the self-care of it all. But I just wanted to share why I feel so strongly about that word.
yeah, no, and I think it's important. And we can talk about it in terms of habit building, right? Like that's essentially when I use the word discipline, I mean we're creating habits for
Yep.
ourselves. Um, and so just to wrap up sort of what long-term self-care looks like, it could be, oftentimes it has to do with dealing with our past, right? I don't know why I said that quietly, like like it's a
So you don't
surprise.
wait because you don't want to wake the past.
Don't wake the past. Right now it's quiet. But it's things like embracing vulnerability and taking risks. It's practicing mindfulness every day. Creating healthy and meaningful relationships, having sustainable, achievable fitness goals, challenging our minds to learn and grow. Um, One thing I really, really think is essential is being kind to ourselves
Yeah.
and learning to accept difficult feelings. And like you were talking about earlier, Tova, allowing yourself to feel the feelings, right? And that's all self-care. That's all long-term self-care that creates habits that eventually turn into your life, right? Like the habit becomes, as you said, um, an essential part of every single day of your life. And that's how we create long-term self-care. So when we're thinking about, okay, all that's super, thanks, Rielly and Tovah. What does that mean for me? How do I figure out my unique self-care goals? how do I do this? Because that's what this season is all about, right? How to's.
Yeah.
And my answer is going to irritate everyone. The answer is you try things, right? Like you try things out and then you ask yourself, is this creating long-term joy? Am I addressing something for myself? Or am I focusing on how it will impact other people or what other people might think about it? So to be clear, I think there are a variety of self-care sort of buckets. Back to the buckets. And so there's emotional self-care, like self-talk, weekly bubble baths, saying no to things that create stress in your life, when you can. Sometimes we can't say no, but when you can say no, saying no. Setting up weekly coffee dates with a friend, having, I know Tova, you during COVID, you did like Zoom chats with your dad and like
Mm-hmm.
things that take care of who you are emotionally and your emotional well-being. Then there's physical self-care. And this tops our list for a reason, prioritizing sleep. I am not good at this. And it's a goal for the year for me is to work on my sleep. Now, part of it is my age and whatever, that'll be a conversation with my doctor. But part of it is also like switching off at night and turning off the screens and turning off like the conversations and just, being present in the moment where I'm about to go to sleep.
Well, and I don't
Um,
want to skip to the end, but what you just said about talking to your doctor,
yeah.
incorporating the health and medical community in your self-care is a very important part of self-care.
Yeah. Yes. And we will get to that in more depth because it's super important to me. And I take it very personally on so many levels. Um, but yeah, so your physical self-care is prioritizing sleep, exercising in a way that works for you, whether it's like going for walks, whether it's going to the gym, whether it's doing yoga at home or all of it, whatever it is. And then, trying to eat in a way that nourishes your body. And that is not a suggestion that you go out and become a dieter. That is a suggestion that you care for your body with good food, um, whatever that is for you. And then there's spiritual self care, right? Whether that means you go to church or synagogue or mosque or wherever you go, whether it means you go out into nature and you commune with the universe, whether you meditate and talk to your spirit guides. It doesn't matter what it is. What matters is how you care for yourself spiritually. Even if you don't believe, right? You still want that feeling of connectedness. So it might be about relationships. It might be about your conversations with your parents or your kids or your neighbors. All of that comes into who you are on a spiritual level. Um, and then, being aware, as we said before, that you have long-term and you have short-term and long-term self-care goals, right? So some self-care is temporary and some self-care is permanent. Like maybe you just need a bath today, right? Like maybe you just need the bubble bath today, but you don't need to do it every single week. That's okay. That's a temporary self-care experience. Maybe you need a therapist and you need to see your therapist every single week for years. That's an enduring kind of
Mhm.
self-care behavior.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, figuring out what you need and what you personally need is really the biggest hurdle to actually, or the first biggest hurdle to getting there. I
Mm-hmm.
also think you might be practicing self-care and you don't know it. You may also be practicing self-care and feeling guilty about it because you're
Mm-hmm.
thinking of it in a I'm being indulgent way. Like Riley knows I love television. Like I love television. I love watching TV shows. Maybe not the one I just watched started last night because it was very, very stressful. Um, but I'm sure eventually I'll love it. But like I love when I find a TV show that I love and that I can like really get into. And or a podcast that I love and I can really get into. And so to me, there is self-care in that. But where the self-care really comes in is on a Saturday when I'm like, I'm going to do some work while I watch TV. And then recognizing I am not going to do any work while I watch TV. I think I'm going to do work, but I'm not actually going to do any work. And so instead of sitting here with my computer out the whole time staring at me, being mad at me for not using it, I'm going to put the computer away and just watch TV. Now, with my personality, I can't actually do that. And I have to like do a puzzle while I'm watching TV, but I can put my TV away. I could put my computer away.
Right.
And so doing the process of like not shaming myself while I watch TV is a big deal. And it's
Yeah.
really nice for me to be able to enjoy doing. And that is self-care. Sitting in front of the TV thinking for 5 hours on a Saturday night, because my social life is rocking, that I should be working, that is not self-care. But putting it away
Yeah.
and being like, no, I'm gonna have a chill night at home and watch some shows, that can be self-care. So you might be practicing some self-care that you don't know, but you just need a little tweaks to really embrace what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's all emotional self-care, right? It's self-talk. It's how are you treating yourself inside your
Yeah.
brain? What are you saying to yourself on any given moment about what it is that you're doing? Are you beating yourself up? Because that's not self-care. Are you shaming yourself? Also not self-care, right? Like self-care encompasses so much more than your physical body. In fact, I mean, the physical stuff is important, but in my opinion, and I may not be right, the mental stuff and the spiritual stuff uh, is the most important long term, right? Because your body's going to age, your body's going to change, and you should take care of it. But as long as your brain is working, right? Like, as long, you
Yeah.
want to keep yourself healthy in that way. Um, we do need to take one more break. So why don't we do that? And when we come back, we'll talk about creating a sustainable routine and what that might look like. So we'll be right back, everyone. In case you didn't already know, we love talking.
True story. More than simply talking, we love researching, prepping, and bringing this podcast to life.
We launched We Go Boldly with the goal of reaching people dealing with the kinds of questions and concerns that we also face.
Things like how to hear my inner voice, how to make sure my habits are worth it and stick, how do I feel my feelings and still manage to function.
After years of personal work and lots of trial and error, we realized we have a lot to share on these topics.
Now we've been broadcasting for over a year and we are proud of our podcast.
And to no one's surprise, we still have a lot to say and talk about.
We sure do. We need your help to keep going. Every episode takes time and money to create, and we would love your support.
So, if you like what we are doing, please support us by joining our Patreon community and becoming a monthly subscriber.
Join our Patreon community today at patreon.com/wegoboldly. We are so grateful to all of our supporters. Now, back to the show.
Okay, welcome back to the show. Before the break, I mentioned that we're going to talk about creating a sustainable routine of self-care. So, what in the world does that mean? You might be asking. I think for me, and the way that it works in my world, and I think this translates for a lot of people, is that I need it to be consistent, but I also need it to be adaptable, right? So, like, I need to exercise every day, except on the days when I don't, right? Like on the day where
Yeah.
I'm like, nope, I can't do it today. I need that to be okay. And I need that to be part of my self-care routine is that, you know what, some days I'm going to take off and that's going to be a part of my routine. Um, or, you know, I need to be able to read every day. And then maybe one day I'm like, nah, I'm not feeling it today. All of those things are part of the process of self-care. Um, and also, I think, you know, another important aspect, and I was just talking about this with my husband, is the things that throw you off of your self-care, right? Being aware of what those are. Like
Yeah.
we were talking about our, you know, our exercise routines and our like healthy eating and all that stuff. And, you know, he mentioned, you know, the hardest part for him is if he gets sick, like how that just throws everything off. And, you know, I think that's true for a lot of us, right? Like if you get sick, it throws things in out of whack and you get out of habits and things like that. Or, you know, if something happens in your family for a week or you get super busy at work, these little hiccups in the road
Yeah.
throw a wrench into our routines. So figuring out how to create a sustainable routine that can weather those bumps is super, super important. And something I'm still working on, just as a side note, if any of you are like, oh my goodness, like I don't have this perfected by any means, but it is doable. Like you can weather those moments and get back to your routines.
Well, and for me, doing any of these challenges where it's like, um, 365 days, or this year, every day I'm going to do X, Y, or Z.
Yeah.
I can't do that. I will not do that. I learned a long time ago. I don't enjoy doing that. I can't do it. And if I miss one day, I am like, I've never been an 80% dieter. I don't understand how to diet 80% of the time. I can do it 100% of the time. I'm really good at that. I don't understand 80%. I understand that's actually how you do it sustainably, but I don't understand how to do it. So when you do something and you have to do it every single day, then when you miss one day, I assume that it's all is lost and you can never reach your goal. So I think a lot of it when you're setting up these routines is you have to set it up so that you can miss a day and you can pick it back up. And the
Yeah.
brilliant thing about that is once you miss a get day and you pick it up again, you know that you can. So, and as an example, this is a crazy example, and I just saw a video of this morning, and it seems oddly timely. So apparently they did an experiment where they put rats in water and they made them swim. And after about like 10 to 15 minutes, the rats were like really struggling, like really struggling. And so they pulled them out, right? Because like the rats were like not barely keeping their head above water, like 15 minutes. So they dried them off. They let them like recoup a little bit. Not a lot. Like they weren't 100% when they put them back in. They put them back in the water. Do you know how long it took them to be like run out of steam again? 60 hours. Because they knew that somebody was going to come get them if they ran out of steam.
Yep.
So they figured they just keep going until somebody came and got them. And like to me, this is like if you set yourself up for success, you can miss that day. It's okay.
Right.
You'll just keep going. It's okay if you have a, you know, I don't know, let's talk about food in the concept of not weight loss, but working on your cholesterol.
Yeah.
And you want to lower your cholesterol. And so you work on eating foods that are cholesterol low foods. I don't know what any of these things are, but let's say you're trying to do that. And then you have a day where you eat a high cholesterol food. Well, if for the last 40 years of your life, you've been eating high cholesterol foods, and for 2 months you've eaten low cholesterol foods, and one day you've had a high cholesterol day, and now you're back to low cholesterol foods again, you're still like way ahead of the low cholesterol game than you were for the first 40 years of your life.
Right.
So like whether it's that or whether it's, you go to the gym and we had Dave on last year at the beginning of the year, and he talked about people coming out the gates and being like, I'm going to exercise every day. I currently have a son who's like, I want to do a 5-minute plank every day and 50 push-ups.
Oh,
And by the way, apparently he rocked an 88-minute plank yesterday because,
that's
sixth graders. But
bananas.
yeah, it's nuts. But but I was like, but what if you, since you don't actually have an exercise routine for the morning, what if you shot for a 5 push-ups? Just 5. And then you did them. And then the next day you could do 6. Like,
Yeah.
what if you just, because you've never done any as a routine. So the point is like, do like, it's that whole, you want to write a book. Well, don't start with 1,000 words. Write a sentence
Right. Write a
and say,
topic.
I'm going to write a sentence or a paragraph, or I'm going to sit down and write 10 minutes,
Yeah.
3 days a week,
Yeah.
something
So
achievable.
exactly. And well, and that goes back to how we set goals, right? But the
Right.
other thing I want to note, and the reason I keep bringing up long-term and short-term self-care is if you are sick or super busy at work and so you're missing your daily chats with your significant other or whoever, um if you can do some short-term self-care in the midst of all that madness, right? Like you're so busy at work, you don't have time for phone calls, all those things. If you can do a 1 minute breathing meditation at lunch while you're working, right? Like if you do 1 minute and then go back to work, you're working through lunch, that is short-term self-care that can help see you through that bump in the road that you're experiencing. And then you can go back to your long-term self-care, right? So it's also important to recognize these two aspects of self-care so that you can utilize them when you need them. There's no reason you can't like use short-term self-care to help you get through these patches. Like maybe that is when you take your bubble bath, or you,
Yeah.
instead of jogging because you're sore or whatever, you do a walk. um there's a million different things you can do. It's the biggest and most important thing we can tell you is to be aware and to be cognizant enough of yourself and how you're feeling and what you're experiencing to give yourself that minute of breathing, or that, bubble bath at midnight because you got home so late, but it's worth it to like have that relaxation time. So a lot of this goes back to, learning to listen to your intuition, learning to pay attention to the flags your body is giving you, your and when I say your body, I mean your body, your mind, your spirit, all of it. Whatever is red flagging you, paying attention to that and being able to adapt and create some sort of routine that will help you um address those feelings in yourself. So, I read multiple 60 plus lists of things to do to like, self-care or whatever. But one list that I liked that was short enough to share is how to get started with a self-care routine. And the first on the list, of course, is determining what activities bring you joy, replenish your energy, and restore your balance. So that's what we've been talking about, like how to figure those things out. And again, a
Yeah.
lot of that is trial and error. Some of it is recognizing what you're already doing, like you said, Tova, um, and allowing yourself to see it as self-care and not worrying about what other people think about it. Um, Start small by choosing one behavior you want to incorporate into your routine in the next week. So this is, surprise, your homework. Um, Figuring out like what one thing can you incorporate this week that is self-care, whatever it is. It really doesn't matter as long as it's self-care for you. And then build up to practicing that behavior every day for a week. Maybe it's not every day. Maybe it's like 3 days a week. Maybe it's once a week you have a phone call with somebody important to you. Whatever makes sense for the activity, that's what you would want to be doing.
Yeah.
And then reflecting on how you feel, adding more practices when you're ready, and then getting support. So this is essential. And we say this all the time, like whether it's from friends and family, a coach, a therapist, a dietitian, a nutritionist, your healthcare provider, community, your workplace, all of those things. Figuring out who it is that can help you and how they can help you. So I want to circle back to this whole concept of healthcare providers that we talked about a little bit before we wrap up the episode for today. And I left this to the end because it's a little bit of a side note, but not really. Um, Oh, and I forgot this one thing. Obviously, mindfulness is essential, right? Like meditate, get out in nature and walk, deep breathe, tap, whatever mindfulness practice works for you. That is fantastic self-care. But let's talk about, your mental health, your physical health, and how your team ought to be helping you with your self-care. So, as I think anyone who listens to the show knows, we are, what's the word I want? We struggle with the way in which women are treated in health settings. So, that's my tactful way of saying it. I don't know. Was that diplomatic enough? I think so.
We are
Um,
ragey about it.
really, really don't like it. So, I was doing some research and none of this was news to me, but I appreciated that there is research confirming what, um, we've been saying for years, and that this research published a self-care framework to specifically point out that in addition to self-care being the activities individuals do on their own to promote physical and emotional health, it also includes the ways that individuals interact with clinicians and healthcare systems to tend to physical and emotional health. So, getting a vaccine, getting, preventative screenings, taking prescription medications, all of that stuff is self-care, right? But you can't really do any of that on your own. So a lot of self-care is self-regulated, and it has to do with you being responsible for you. However, there are things where you need the support. I mean, I think you always need support, but there are things where you really need the support of medical professionals. And that has to do with being on any kind of medication, whether it's for your mental or physical well-being, whether you need to have a screening done, and you should get all your screenings, PSA. um,
Yes.
whether it's just going for your annual physical and having concerns and having those concerns heard and listened to and acted upon. So finding professionals who actually listen to you, which is harder than I ever thought it would be. Um, and having your concerns heard and addressed in a way that makes sense and is helpful is self-care. And it's self-care that requires all of the people in a care field like Tova and myself to actually provide that support and to be willing to hear people and listen to people and understand their concerns and questions and everything related to their health. Um, so if you're not experiencing that, if you're not receiving care that meets that standard, I would highly encourage you to find someone else to provide the care that you need. Um,
I would also just encourage you, if you don't have a friend or family member in your life who you're comfortable talking about your medical concerns with,
mhm.
try to develop a relationship, make that a goal of this year where you can, because there are so many things. And I know it's a joke, a meme or something that you see on Instagram where it's like something you think is normal until you tell somebody else, and then you're
Yeah.
like, oh, I guess that wasn't normal. Um, but
Or
it,
it on the flip side of that, where you're me and you call up your friend Tova and you're like, I'm clearly dying from whatever,
like
and I don't know what to do about it,
yeah,
even
like
though
maybe
it's
you're
like,
dehydrated. Um, but I think it is really important that you have people in your life that you can both have for accountability for things like sleep support, like people who know that I've been struggling sleeping are sending me like ideas, which I really appreciate. And they're texting, how are you sleeping? And
mhm,
that is really helpful. But also, if you are, going and seeing a doctor and you're texting with friends, you can say, well, this was my experience. And they can say, okay, that makes sense. It sounds like you're on the right
right.
track. Or they can say, what? That doesn't
Yeah.
make any sense. Why didn't your
Yeah.
doctor do this? Or why didn't they do that? Or why didn't you do that? All of those things. And it's really, really important because when you are, maybe you've gone to your doctor, the same doctor for 30 years. And so you just assume at this point that they're doing what they should be doing. Or maybe you don't feel well. And so you're not thinking clearly because you don't feel well. And that's okay. Whatever the case might be, it is really, really helpful to have an extra set of ears. They don't have to be at the appointment with you, but just so they know what's going on in your life. And also so they remember your symptoms. And maybe it's a spouse, but in my experience, and I don't mean my own personal experience, I mean my experience of dealing with friends and their spouses. Spouses are not always the best people to do this.
Yeah.
Um,
And I don't know how to say this without sounding snarky, but if your spouse is a man, they're not having the same experiences with medical
right.
professionals that you are. And while, I've had this conversation with my spouse multiple times and he hears me and listens to me, he's like, "Oh yeah, that's terrible." Um, he believes what I'm telling him, but it's also not his experience, right?
Yep.
Like he's not a woman and he hasn't had the same experiences with healthcare providers that I had. Um, and so I think having a girlfriend or a mom or whoever to that has shared in those experiences makes it a little easier on the heart to talk about. And that's my experience. It might not be for all of you, but
Yep.
that's mine. Um, so with all of that being said, self-care, just to wrap up, right? How do you self-care? The first step is to figure out what it is that resonates with you to bring you long-term joy, whether it's has to do with your physical, your emotional, or your spiritual well-being. So start there and try some things out. Go out for walks. Start trying new recipes. I don't know. I'm trying to think of all the self-care things. This year is the year of self-care for me. And I'm trying new recipes. I'm trying new exercises. I'm getting back into meditating every day. And those things are my kind of self-care. I'm getting outside, super big for me. And I'm ensuring that my relationships are in a healthy place. And all of those things are important for my own self-care. So I've spent time thinking about it, and I've journaled on it, and I've written things down and crossed things off and been like, no, there's no way I'm doing that every day. I'll do it 3 times a week or whatever. So take the time to do that. And I guess this is your homework for the week, right? Is to take the time to figure out what it is that you want to add to your life, something that will bring you joy and balance, whatever that looks like for you. We'll have a whole other conversation on that, I'm sure. Um, and write it down and let us know. Reach out to us. Either if you don't want to put it out there for the whole world to see, you can always email it to us. But if you don't mind sharing, share it on Instagram and tag us so we can see what it is that you're doing for self-care this year. What's important to you? We would love to know. If you need an idea for self-care, we would definitely encourage you to join our weekly women's circle. We are revamping that currently, and it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm really, really excited about the things we're going to be doing. We're going to have new moon circles. We're going to have a book club. We're going to do a monthly tarot card pull, oracle card, however you describe them. So there's lots of things going on there. And then also you can always join our year review crew. As we mentioned earlier in the show, it is a whole year of focusing on yourself and what you need and how to get there. So
Yep.
if you're interested, you can find all of that information on our website or in our social media, or you can always email us and ask us questions. We would love to hear from you.
That's about it.
All right. So we will see you all with more how-tos next week. So stay tuned and have a wonderful, wonderful week, everyone.
Thanks so much for listening to We Go Boldly podcast. We know you're busy and we love spending time with you.
If you enjoyed this week's episode, let us know. Head to Apple Podcasts right now to rate and review our show. While you're there, be sure to click that subscribe button.
Want more us time? Follow us on all the socials at Go Boldly Together.
Want even more us time? As in all the coaching pizzazz. Find us at goboldlyinitiative.com for all the info.
We will be back with more excitement, research, and deep thoughts next week.
Until then, keep on being the bold, brave, amazing people we know you already are.